www.nationaldemographics.org/live. We then started to receive those maps from you in the community. And I want to let you know, National Demographics Corporation, they've worked with many communities up and down the state of California. And they will tell you the involvement from this community has been absolutely phenomenal. The number of maps that we have received has exceeded many other communities that they have participated in this process with. So you guys have done an outstanding job of taking charge and being engaged in this very important process for our community. We then held a third public hearing on September 19th, at which point in time there were draft maps that were presented. So that included the maps that were submitted by the members of our community, as well as 3 maps that National Demographics Corporation was contracted to be able to provide for you based on the feedback that we were hearing at those previous community meetings. After the City Council held the public hearing on September 19th, we again went back out to you, the members of this community here in West Covina, to get your feedback regarding those maps. So we had our community meeting last Saturday on the 7th, and then we have our community meeting this evening tonight. Now, following this process, we're going to be going to our 4th public hearing. You notice there's lots of public hearings, lots of opportunities for you to provide your feedback, and that's part of the requirements of the law, and it's also part of our settlement agreement, that we agreed to continually engage with you, the members of our community, regarding this very important process. So the 4th public hearing is currently scheduled tentatively for November 7th. And the reason I say tentatively is that the City Council needs to be able to review the map that is going to be selected twice. So not once, but twice at a public hearing before they can actually select that map. As you may recall, for those of you that attended our community meeting last Saturday, at that point in time, we had 16 maps from the community that were submitted and 3 from National Demographics Corporation. Today, you will see 19 maps submitted by the community and 3 submitted by National Demographics Corporation. If the City Council opts to select any one of those 3 additional maps that came in and were not available at the September 19th public hearing, then they will need to hold another public hearing after that to be able to adopt and approve those maps. Now, I want to assure you, your City Council is fully committed to holding as many public hearings as are necessary to get a map selected in this community. They have to select one map, only one. They cannot select multiple maps. So they will hold as many public hearings as needed, whether that's November 7th, November 14th, November 21st, December 5th, and so forth, and up until the December 16th deadline, which is required as part of the settlement agreement. Now, ultimately, when that map is selected, the first time that we will ever use that map here in the City of West Covina will be as part of the November 2018 City Council election process. So while we're going to get it all selected here in 2017, we're not going to be using that until all the way next year. So the public engagement process, I kind of walked you through the different steps as to how did we get here, what did we do? We had demographic data, there was a lot of detail that went into those maps. A lot of demographic information regarding the different voting, demographics, regarding the population here in the City of West Covina. We talked about voting age, we talked about the ethnic makeup, and we went through a lot of different discussions at all of those community meetings that were held, as well as the public hearing. We also talked about the legal requirements with regard to the settlement agreement. And remember, one of the things that came up often in these discussions was that those 5 city council districts have to be roughly equal in size when it comes to their population. And we're talking about a plus or minus 5%. Now that's going to come into play later when Shalise goes through the different maps and as to why some of those maps are not being recommended for adoption by the City Council, because they would be in violation of either our settlement agreement or the California Voting Rights Act and would leave us open and vulnerable to an additional lawsuit. When we were drawing and selecting those maps, we also provided you the ability to draw your own maps, and we put all that information up on westcovina.org/districts. You can continue to go to that website to get additional information. We update the website regularly. In fact, you can even sign up for what's called an e-notification. So that way, anytime that we do any updates to the website, you are personally notified that we have made those updates to the website. We also let you know what updates were made to the website. So you can find out that just this week, we uploaded those 3 additional maps. The interactive mapping tool was updated. We also provided additional information for any FAQs and questions that you might have that came up at recent meetings. And those are the kind of notifications that you can sign up for. Now, the type of feedback that we're requesting today. So I told you how did we get here. Now let's talk about where we are today. So today we're coming at you and we want to get your feedback regarding these maps that are up on the wall, and then which is what Shalise is going to be going through one by one to explain to you. We want to hear what it is that you like about those maps. What in particular do you like? Which map in particular do you like? And then we want to hear, what do you not like about those maps? Which maps in particular do you not like? And be specific. It is extremely helpful if you are specific and you say map number or map purple or map green is not something that I identify with here in this community. Those kind of specific comments are extremely helpful to provide to the City Council when they are looking to select the final map that will divide our community up into 5 City Council districts. And if you happen to be looking at all of the maps today, all 22, and you still don't find yourself identifying with any of them, provide suggestions or modifications. Say, I really like the yellow map, but can you add this? Or can it be modified as such? And be specific in providing that feedback as well, because those modifications are also available. Now, if you get to the end of the process and you still don't feel after today that you find a map that you identify with, you can still continue to create your own maps. But keep in mind, the additional maps will have to be viewed by the City Council at 2 public hearings. So that's possibly November 7th and again at a future date. So if there was a map that you already identified with, that could already be approved at the November 7th City Council meeting. Now, where are we going to go after today? So comments after today. Let's say you leave this evening and you still have comments or something came up as you were heading out to the parking lot and it was a new idea that you hadn't thought of while you were here. I encourage you to continue to provide that feedback, but we do ask that you give us that feedback by no later than Tuesday, October 17th. And the reason for that is that the feedback that you give us through that date, we can then include in the staff report that's going to be going to City Council on November 7th. Now, let's say after October 17th, you happen to be talking to a fellow resident, a fellow neighbor, and you have another idea or additional feedback. We still want to hear that feedback. And we encourage you to attend one of our public hearings that is coming up to provide that feedback. But just know that that feedback would not be directly included in the staff report. Now, you can provide that feedback in many different ways. You can email it to us. You can go online on the website and submit the online form. You can also provide the feedback directly to our city clerk's office over at City Hall or the city manager's office. And then you can also attend the public hearing on Tuesday, November 7th. So that kind of tells you, how did we get here? What are we doing today? And where are we going from here after today? At this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Shalise, and she's going to go through all of those different maps and help you kind of understand why they are grouped into certain areas. Once Shalise finishes her presentation, again, we're going to take a brief 5-minute break. We're going to give you, the members of the community, the opportunity to go up and look at those maps up on the wall in close detail. And keep in mind, those maps are also available at westcovina.org/districts if you want to look at any of them. Additionally, on that same website is our interactive mapping tool, where you can actually plug in your exact home address into any of the maps that are listed and find out where your home would be located in each of those possible districts. I encourage you to take the time to do that when you get a chance. So at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Shalise. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, and Doug apologizes he cannot be here, but he's been all over the state these last few days. In fact, on Tuesday we had 4 meetings going on at the same time when they were all looking at draft maps. So it's been a challenge with CBRA and the various cities that were sued with similar lawsuits, and fortunately for West Covina, you have time to do these community forums. Most of the other cities are in such a tight 90-day time frame that they can barely squeeze in one community forum to try to get all the public hearings in. It's very impressive that you have submitted so many maps. 19 maps submitted by the public is remarkable, and it says a lot about your community and your interest in this process. And we as demographers really appreciate it, because sometimes we go to all this work and are hopeful that we have people actually participating and we get no feedback. So as Laura did a great job explaining, this is your community forum, and we want to hear back from you on the maps. I'm going to quickly go through the maps, It's difficult to go through each one individually when we have this many, but we group them together and we can have some meaningful discussion. We did have 19 maps submitted by the public. We had 3 that were drawn by NDC. NDC stands for National Demographics Corporation. So we have assisted 55 of the 66 cities that have converted over to voting districts since CVRA was enacted. So, yeah, thank you. There are 2 of the maps that turn out to be duplicates. So we combine those 2. There were 5 that are not viable in their present state due to population or not being contiguous. And those are the 2 factors, the legal factors that we need to abide by. They need to be population balanced within about a 5% deviation, and they need to have contiguous borders, meaning you should be able to walk within your entire district without ever having to leave it. Okay. So what we did is we grouped them together. The first category we grouped them by. Oh, let's talk about the ones that are not population balanced or not contiguous. And actually, these maps are very useful to us, especially in the beginning of the process, because this gives us some indication of the important areas of the city. This is a really good tool for us to know what's important to you as far as keeping communities together. And then oftentimes you can take this and work it into a balanced map. In some cases, there are maps that are very similar that do match some of these. So 102, 103, 107, and 118 are not population balanced, and 104 is non-contiguous. So you can see you cannot walk from the green, all the green areas. That's what is meant by that.
Can you go back to that? So because they're not, are you eliminating or those from consideration?
They would, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So the maps that are not population balanced and not contiguous, the council still may consider those, but we're not recommending them because they could open us up for additional legal action, and they are not compliant with our settlement agreement or the California Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, I just need to
First category we grouped them by, you can see that the District 1 is north of the freeway, and District 3 in most cases is very central. So these are very similar. They obviously have their differences, but we group these together just for purposes of discussion because they share some likeness. In most cases, many of them have similar District 5s in the lower area. We got so many of these that had that northern District 1 that it's on 2 different slides. You're seeing the first 3 here. And actually the 105 is very similar to similar to 118, which had some population imbalances. And actually there were only like 3 population units off, so it was very close. And then you see 101 and 110 were similar, same border, so we grouped those together. Go to the next slide. And these are the remaining 4 that share the same characteristic of the Northern District and the Central District 3. The next category we call the Northwestern District 1. So you can see it does go above and below the freeway, but it still keeps District 1 pretty compact over on the west side of the northwest side of the city. And in most of these cases, your District 5 is very similar as well. And then we have vertical maps. We're seeing many cities go to the vertical map method. Comments we hear from people who prefer vertical maps is you get a better mix of the city. So each representative shares a mix of all the different elements of the city with vertical maps. West Covina is more set up towards a vertical map. You can achieve the same thing with a horizontal map, and we see cities that have vertical freeways do horizontal maps. So it's same concept, but in this case, since the freeway is typically a very dividing factor in a city,
So you'll see vertical maps with often submitted with people who are using that kind of guiding principle of we want someone to share all the different various aspects of the city. I did want to mention that in all cases, every map has at least 2 majority Latino citizen voting age population districts. In many cases, they have 3 districts where the majority citizen voting age population. Those that don't have 3, the third one has a plurality of Latino. So there are no bearings on any of the maps. There's no significant reason to go with one map or another to meet the Voting Rights Act. They all have done a good job of doing that, so there should be no issues there. For the Asian citizen voting age population, most all the maps are around 41%, 41, 43, and it's typically in District 5. So now, that's kind of a quick overview. As you said, this is your opportunity. We want to hear from you. It's very helpful if there's a map you like to identify it by the number. That's going to help your city council in choosing a map. So oftentimes, you'll describe a map, but if we can actually hear the number of the map or the numbers of the map that you like or don't like, that helps the process tremendously.
Great, thank you so much, Shalise. So we're gonna go ahead and take this time. This is going to be the 5-minute break. So during this 5-minute break, you'll have the opportunity to go up and look at each of the maps closer. You can also come up and ask specific questions. Keep in mind that you can also ask those questions in the larger forum once we're done with the 5-minute break. I want to remind everyone we are broadcasting live on YouTube at westcovina.org/live. So if you do come up in this area, you will be in the shot for that. And then when we do start the questions, Tony will be turning the camera out to the audience as well. Okay, so we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. If you need a restroom, they're located directly in the back.
It's figured it, yeah. So the freeway, 17 Street. Yeah, I guess you can fly. Right. No, it just means if you were.
You don't have to step it up your district. That's what I figured. So,
I forget that you got all those factors you can't actually. Yeah.
and I said another one too, but I kind of.
Let's go over and get out of this shot. Why did I get more of And what did you
All right, I'm going to give everybody a 1-minute warning. 1-minute warning. If everyone could go ahead and take their seats, we're going to get regrouping in 1 minute. Thank you.
Put the glasses on my head and my hair goes.
You're going to be taking notes of people.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to pull a picture after that?
Do I have a comment for
All right, we're going to go ahead and get back to our community meeting this evening on Thursday, October 12th of 2017, over here at the West Covina Senior Center. This is our second community meeting regarding the discussion of the maps that have been submitted by both members of the public as well as by National Demographics Corporation. I'd like to note for the record that we now have a quorum of your West Covina City Council. In addition to Councilmember Lloyd Johnson, who is here, we also have Councilmember James Toma, and in the back, Mayor Corey Warshaw. The Assistant City Clerk, Rosalia Butler, will be noting that in the minutes that we now have achieved a quorum. As a reminder, your City Council is not making any decisions this evening, even though a quorum has been achieved by the Council for tonight's meeting. At this point in time, we're going to go ahead and open it up for community feedback. Now, to remind you, we set a couple of ground rules that we're going to be going. Everyone gets one opportunity at first, so we're going to go to first-time speakers, your opportunity to provide your feedback. If you've already spoken, I will be moving on to someone else before coming back to you for a second or third time. We anticipate wrapping up tonight's meeting at 8:30 p.m., so that's roughly a little bit over an hour from now that we're going to have for this open dialogue and discussion. You're able to ask questions of our city attorney, as well as Shalise, who is here from National Demographics Corporation, our consultant, as well as myself. And again, my name is Laura Minnick, and I am your deputy city manager. When we do get that feedback from you, we want to get specific feedback. with regard to which maps do you like, which maps do you not like, and why. And if you can name that map, whether it's the number of the map or the color of the map, that would be extremely helpful. So before I open up to feedback, I know Shalise wanted to give a quick announcement, and then we're going to go start getting your feedback from the community. Thank you.
I want to thank Mr. Torres for asking for further clarification. When I said you theoretically should be able to walk within the boundaries of your district, it's not possible in your city. You have mountains and other things to deal with. So it's just meaning that, say if you were a drone, you wouldn't cross another district. So that's what we mean with contiguous borders. And then also when we were talking about the maps that were either not population balanced or not contiguous, and 107 is also not contiguous. So there were 2 that were not contiguous. It just has a little, it's part of District 5 that was not contiguous. That's why it appears on that page. So just wanted to clarify that.
Great. So at this point in time, we're going to go ahead and open it up for public comment. Keeping in mind, we are broadcasting live at westcovina.org/live. This is being broadcast on YouTube, and you can also watch a recording of tonight's meeting later at home. Our cable TV assistant, Tony, will be turning the camera to the audience. We do encourage you to announce your name. If you would like to, it is not required, but if you would like to, you can announce your name. So I saw a question here to begin. Go right ahead.
I'm Bill Robinson. I don't favor any of the maps because I don't have enough information. I understand as a part of the court settlement that, I mean, these maps have a big effect on West Covina's governance going forward. And the court settlement doesn't allow us residents to know which of the maps are pitting various incumbent councilmen against each other. I think that's a significant factor in choosing a map, and how can I choose a map if I don't have the right information? The second point I wanted to make is we were talking before about the ethnicity factors on each of the maps, and I think the 5, I guess there's 5 groups of maps. I'd like to see 5 spreadsheets that show those maps broken down in various legally significant ethnicity groups, which I understand are Hispanic, Asian, and maybe Filipino. The legally significant breakdowns for the groups on spreadsheets, so I can compare the map based on that legally significant factor. And I object to the court stipulating that these maps aren't allowed to list how these maps affect councilmen being pitted against each other, because that's significant, and I can't choose a map without knowing that.
What I failed to mention in the beginning, and just many of you have noticed that our city attorney, Kim Barlow, is taking furious notes over here and typing them. So that is so that we have all of that feedback from you. So if you do see her typing on her laptop, that is what she is doing. What I'm going to do at this point in time is allow her to be able to respond to some of those questions that were brought up for the members of the public here. So Ms. Barlow.
Thank you. I did want to point out that while the incumbency or possible candidacy of others may not be considered by the council. I don't know what the problem is.
Is your mic on? Nope, it's off.
May not be considered by the council members in selecting the map. It doesn't stop you from, I mean, their addresses are all public information. You can plot for yourself where they live on the maps and use that information for yourself in making a choice or recommendation.
Yeah.
But the council members are not permitted to do that.
Yeah, well, the residents who vote all they should know that. How can you choose a map without that information?
Again, all of that information is public information, and so anyone who wanted to Good. I also want to point out that the demographic information that you're asking about for spreadsheet, every map has that information on the back, and it's all available on the website. She's put the one, she had the one up for one of the maps.
If you just,
But my comment was to have those collected on 5 spreadsheets so I can have it grouped instead of having to go through 22 maps. And my mind doesn't work that way. I mean, I like to see things collected in groups so I can understand what's going on.
Okay. So for the remainder of the folks who are interested in the demographics and want to know where to find it, this is the city's website, cityofwestcovina.org /
westcovina.org.
I'm sorry, not City of West, westcovina.org / districts. And then you can see all the different maps are listed. And if you just open one of them up, you'll first see the map, and then if you continue to scroll down, you'll see the breakdown for that particular map. And then the printouts in the back have a printout back. So I understand what you're saying. You'd like to see it on one master spreadsheet.
Or at least 5 spreadsheets. I mean, the ones that are, you know, close relatives could be on the same spreadsheet. But, you know, 19 is just, you know, it's not collected and organized.
Yeah, it's difficult when you have 19 maps.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Okay. I am in favor of a few of these, specifically the north-south. I'm looking at your NDC green plan and then plan 117. My question is, 117 was submitted, and when it was submitted, it had a legend. The legend identified by that person who went through all this work that she gave you an economic type graph, a legend, to identify how she came up to the conclusion, not only based on population, but that she also gave a business entity to each one of those. I think it's important for the residents to know how that person put all that time and effort, and so that we could make sense as we're looking at these to say how they came to that conclusion and say, wow, that makes sense. The second question I have is NDCs is similar to the same thing, but we'd also like to understand, well, how NDC, if they had a legend that made sense, or how they came to a conclusion in dividing up their 3 plans. Was it purely based on population, or did they also take into consideration the business entity? That information is important to have on these maps, just more information from each of the map creators. That's all I'd like to see.
So we draw the maps not necessarily based on our own observations of the business, but we do take the comments into consideration. And oftentimes we'll get a map submitted that is not population balanced or not contiguous. Sometimes if we have time, we're able to have a conversation with the map submitter and work with them on getting it so that it's balanced. And when we have those notes, it's extremely helpful. So we take those notes, and that's how we come up with our plan. We don't study your city and find out what we think are the best commercial areas, but we take it all from feedback. That's why it's so important, and those comments are taken into consideration when we're drawing the maps.
So the 3 NDCs were all based on
Various
feedback from
comments
the
through the
community.
hearings.
Okay.
Okay. And we figured out what the interference was, so you shouldn't have any more interference on the microphones. Excellent. Sound quality is good. Okay, over here on the right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Freddie Sykes, 39-year resident of West Covina. Map 105, please. Now, when you read the CDRA, one of the things that I focused on was the compactness was important to me. And I'm speaking. If you would be quiet, I'm sure they're going to give you your turn. Thank you. the maps that are in that family of compactness is what I'm speaking for, so I don't care which one exactly it is, as long as we get this compact focus which follows the CDRA. And the maps in this nature gives you 5 fire stations. And thinking community oriented and thinking towards the future, when we get our financials in order, we can perhaps have 5 police substations put together with the fire stations. Because when you look for these situations such as the Vegas just recently happened, we've had some others where there have been these mass shootings, you got it in schools and so forth. Usually what happens is the police have to go in first. And they're dealing with the shooters directly and the gunfight. But however, I think they've learned now, both the first responders, meaning police and fire, go together. They train together, they go together. Why? Because life is precious. And so when they both go together, things get done more efficiently, and instead of having people bleed out, you might be able to save some because there's a firefighter right there embedded with them to help. So that's a picture of the future that can come with compactness. And not only that, our fire stations are embedded in all these communities already. The police station is isolated in the downtown area. So again, thinking more community oriented, hopefully we can work towards that in the future. And I previously spoke about districts, and I'll let that stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jim Harris. My first time here, and I'm an original resident. We moved here in '56. I live in the house that I grew up in. So this city means a lot to me. I like the idea of the district representation. I like what you did over here with the 5 maps. I'm thinking maybe for the next meeting, if you could print those out too, so they're right in our hands. For me, that would be very helpful. I think that's one more thing for you to do, but I do like that you've done the workforce, you've grouped them. That makes sense to me on what the ones that in common. And I would even say maybe label A, B, C, D. Those are this is Group A, Group B. That's how my mind works. And all the maps have very similar qualities because I do see it when I went up and looked. And I do see that there's the vertical thinking that we discussed before the meeting with my co-resident here. I will piggyback on former Councilman Sykes with the block or the sense of community, and actually that's what came to mind when you said walking the district. Now I know that maybe that I didn't hear that the way you intended, but I like that idea, and it does tie in with community and where the fire stations are. If we are going to go into 5 districts, I'm not so inclined to have them from one end of the city to the other. It really is more, would be more for the neighborhood. So to give you specific numbers, the group with 101, 110, which is essentially the same, right? 105 I like a lot, I put a star by it. And it is that what's up right now, 105?
No.
Can you bring it back?
Let me take the green one off.
Yeah, that's what happens at home too. That's why this is great to have it in the paper. I guess for lack of a better name, I'll call that a block or more geography oriented. That to me makes a lot of sense. So, tweaked with the necessary demographic and population things, but I go to vote in person, and the reason I do that is I like to know who my neighbors are. If you go to one of the vertical maps, you're going to have somebody down the south end in the same district as someone way over, let's say, on the northeast. Not that that's bad, but I'm not walking over there, to use that example that you gave. So that would be mine. I like 105. I like a little more geographically walk-centered. I'll end up with, and again, I'm counting what you shared with me, and I understand what you're saying about you believing the need of everybody having a business core or a shopping center, but I don't see that. I think it's more about neighborhood. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your feedback. In the back, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I like the 117. I think it's more inclusive because I've been here since 1960, and I live north of the freeway. And it's like you're either north of the freeway or you're south of the freeway. Well, now we're a district that encompasses both. And plus, I love how they did an economic center in each one. But I think that would bring West Covina closer than what it is now. I like that. And then it's just like, just for an example, since we've had all this mess with our freeways, we've got a new freeway called Workman Avenue. Okay, and it is a freeway.
Yes.
Now, it's going to go through 3 districts. I kind of like that because I can then go to 3 different places and say, this is a mess. Clean it up, So that's why I prefer 117.
Thank you. Saw a hand on this side of the room? No?
Yeah.
Over here? Yes, go ahead.
I agree with Dale. My name is Gloria Gander. I think the plan number 117, we have north and south now. What's the big deal? I know people on the north as well as in the south. So get to know everyone in the city. And I like this because it has 5, whatever you're calling these now, map layers or whatever. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there. And the economic stability of each of them is splendid.
Thank you. Okay, over here.
I wanted to go to the green and purple and yellow plan. I think those are the the consultants. I'll just go through them quick because I know there's many, but all 3 consultant plans. The issue I have with those, first of all, I'm a proponent of compact districts, not the north-south. The north-south approach is good. It has aspects that might appeal to some, like a representative representing multiple communities, which some people prefer. But myself, I prefer the local representation, to have a representative closer by in the neighborhood. So I think it's just a matter of preference, but in my opinion, I think a local representation is more important than, I guess, the economics or the politics of having a vertical approach. So it seems like all the 3 consultant plans are vertical, and one issue is that they don't share multiple boundaries. So that's why I would disqualify all of those, in my opinion. I think it's important for each district to share a boundary with another district, or at least 2 districts, maybe 3, because that encourages collaboration. So for that, I don't really support any of the 3 consultant maps. I submitted Plan 101. 101, I think is acceptable. I'm not going to really specify a preference for any of the maps. I think a lot of them are acceptable, but 101, what I did is I divided up the downtown. So District 1 has Queen of the Valley and the Civic Center. District 2 has the mall, and District 3 has the lakes. One change I might make is to include maybe the auto mall in District 3, so District 3 has a stronger commercial presence. District 4 has the Eastland Center, and District 5 has the Heights and the BKK area. Map 105, I think it's acceptable. The only comment I would have is I would still prefer to see downtown shared as opposed to within one district. 106 is vertical. For that reason, I don't really find 106 acceptable, in my opinion. 108, I think is okay, but again, I think it's a little too elongated for District 3. Just get to the next one. I did 111 as well. 111 is also shared downtown, just a different orientation. District 1 still has a civic center, and Queen of the Valley. District 2 has the lakes, and District 3 has the mall. And 4 and 5 have Eastland and the Heights. So I think that's acceptable as well. And then 112 has all of the mall, or all of the downtown in one district. And depending on the council's preference, if they want to maintain that community of interest, which is downtown district, that's an option as well, to keep downtown in one district. And also, District 3 is a little different there. So District 3 is more horizontal. And now that I think back, I might redo that map because District 3 doesn't have as many commercial entities that might improve that balance. So I think all of the rest are either vertical or compact, so I won't carry on. But the last point I want to make would be that the vertical, to me, has good aspects. But for me, if I lived on Valley Boulevard, say, on District 5, on the vertical map, and our representative was north of the 10, for that representative, it's good because they're able to represent a variety of communities and interact, but the likelihood of them having better interaction with those who are simply closer is just higher. It's just our human instincts to walk, to carry about in our own areas. And that district, I'm not saying a council member will do that, but it'll be that much harder for him to interact or her to interact with the southern area. So, and the benefit for vertical, which would be to somehow have that council member represent various areas, doesn't seem high enough to justify that lack of representation. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Who else has some feedback for us? Don't be shy. All right, go ahead.
Jerry Patras. I live north of the freeway. My family lives north of the freeway. They regularly go down and shop in the southern part of the city. This is not a huge city. It's small. I have friends that live down in Shadow Oaks, live in South Hill, the area designated South Hills, wherever that really is. I haven't found it yet. Throughout the city. I communicate with council people through the phone and email. This should not be a big issue. It's not a huge city. My concern is that the council members become so isolated, we also call that kind of a balkanized, so focused on their own neighborhood that they forget, inadvertently, they're human, the commercial areas, and it's those commercial areas and the policy that they make that keeps this city vital. The freeway corridor is known in the East San Gabriel Valley as a critical economic corridor that other cities envy. And if we don't have council people crossing and represent that area and representing it, we're going to have problems in a few years. Maybe not now, but we will. That's why I want to thank John Shoemaker for getting people thinking about the vertical approach. He's the first one I saw come up with something. Phil Kaufman acknowledged at a council meeting his, and he was dealing with commercial areas. 117 deals with the commercial areas. I can't emphasize how concerned some of us really are. Now, when we live over the commercial areas, now, those of us that live north of the freeway also have concerns that we're in the HUD areas, designated areas, and we're concerned that if we only have one or two representatives down the road, all these little HUD grants are going to just end up in our area. When the intent of the federal and state laws are to have low-income housing and HUD programs spread throughout the city. So having council members that look at the city as a whole, even their district, to me is just absolutely critical. When you look at the BKK area on any map, BKK distorts the map. We drive by it like that. It's not a big deal. Therefore, I really would like to encourage the council to hold other hearings so that all of these vertical maps that have come in can be discussed, and maybe the ideas that John and Phil and Ann have got could be put into a map that becomes seriously considered. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to reinforce, your city council has committed to holding as many public hearings as are necessary in order to adopt a map. Those public hearings need to occur and conclude so that the city council can adopt that map by no later than December 16th of this year. And that's per our settlement agreement. Those maps need to be viewed at not one, but 2 public hearings. So any maps that were not previously viewed at the September 19th meeting will need to be viewed at 2 public hearings in order to be viewed. So that would be in addition to November 7th, they would need to go again either November 14th, November 21st, December 5th, and so on and so forth, so that it was viewed at 2 public hearings in order to be adopted. But again, your city council is committed to holding as many of those as are necessary to make that adoption occur. We had some additional questions in the back. Yes, Mr. Shoemaker, go ahead.
Thank you. Just thought I'd reiterate some of my previous comments at other meetings. The idea of north-south was, again, as everybody talking, thank you, Jerry, to notice, I think it brings the city together, and to say you have to have compact or too big or things like that is, Grace Napolitano, doesn't she represent this area, and where does she live?
Yeah, right.
Whittier?
Yep.
I used to live in Whittier. Matter of fact, there's a big mountain, a big hill between the 2 areas. So does she have some sort of power or ability to represent all different types of people, regardless of where she lives, but nobody in West Covina can do that? I don't know. I think, doesn't Judy Chu have part of our city too? Yeah. And where does she live?
No.
Monterey Park. Monterey Park. And somehow she's capable of representing all of us. So the idea is that to say, because somebody lives north of the freeway, they're completely incapable of understanding the south side. Or because they live in South Hills, they're completely incapable of understanding the other side, is a false argument. The idea is that, the approach that everybody wants is to get people in place who will represent the city. And every time you go to districts where it's just my little area, you're going to have issues. And I'll repeat the same thing again. If we had some of these districts that basically balkanize the city, BKK would still be open. Yep. And you know what? The south side would still be complaining about the smell. Mm-hmm. And at least 3 other districts would go, replace the $5 million and we'll close it. Because they would not care. The north side would not care about losing $5 million. The west side would not care because they don't want to lose $5 million. And the central area would not care because they would not want to lose $5 million. When you have a setup that way, where something can be shoved into a certain area, people don't care. Prime example, you go to the community center, the gym at Cortez. Originally that was going to be put down in Shadow Oak Park. And the people around Shadow Oak Park threw a fit, and because they did not want it. Guess what would have happened if we had had council districts? It would have been stuffed down there, because you know what? You can't vote me out if I live in one of the other districts, and I don't get anybody mad. I remember Jefferson DeRue was coming out and complaining about it quite a bit. Well, you know what? if we had had some of these council districts that aren't not north-south, they would have said, you know what, Jefferson, you're right. I don't want you mad at me. Shadow Oak is where it goes. This helps break some of those things up and prevent that from happening. You know, I appreciate people. We all have different opinions, so I'm not knocking the opinion itself. I'm giving the rationale and reasons that I selected the one I did. Also, when you look at it, we're focusing in on that corridor, but we're forgetting that there could be some development going on at BKK. The Azusa corridor, you have down there, what is it, Amar, you have that area where there's significant shopping. And what do you have down there is, what is it, the fourth most congested intersection in the county? You know, if I'm on the north side, do I care about that problem? Shove it down there. They already have traffic problems. I don't care. And that's what we're trying to avoid as much as possible, is that you don't have a situation where everybody can gang up on one district, because you might have one, if not two other people who would be impacted by that decision in their council district. So that's kind of the idea behind it, in looking at it. Like I said, everybody's got good ideas, and I appreciate the ideas, but I'm more inclined to north-south, you know, from that standpoint, just to avoid that specific, those types of issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yes, go ahead.
Hi. I kept raising my hand and nobody was taking me. Jefferson Drew. Just an observation. I viewed the last meeting on YouTube, and the audience couldn't be heard. Maybe Mike Runner at the next one might help those at home, because I was there, so I know what was said, but in reviewing it, the audience wasn't audible. With regards to the 3 maps submitted by NDC, what criteria was used to draw these maps? Was it just population and it being contiguous? Or were the concerns that we're hearing here tonight, which I want to underscore, schools, shopping corridors, main arteries like the freeway, were these elements taken into consideration when submitting these 3 maps? And why these 3 in regards to the others that have been submitted, or vis-a-vis the others submitted in this package? If you can address that, please.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and have Shalise from National Demographics Corporation respond. Shalise.
So the 3 maps submitted by NDC took into consideration the totality of the comments that we received on communities of interest and neighborhoods, while maintaining the population balance and the contiguous requirements. So in some cases, we get a map and it just completely is not contiguous, and we're able to draw a map, and if it makes sense, we'll do so. We hear comments, we like this about this map, this part about this map. Oftentimes we'll combine 2 maps. For each of the particular ones, I can't tell you the recipe for each one, and certainly these have no preference as far as being the preferred maps over any of the numbered maps. But they gave a voice to people who did not submit maps, or who submitted maps that were flawed, or from the comments that we're getting today. So when we're getting comments that say, for example, you know, I wish I would have included the auto mall. You know, if we hear that early on in the process, then as we're drawing maps, we can consider that. So we're later in the process, but when we hear comments like that, we keep note of every comment that we get and draw maps that seem to meet the need of the community, respecting those communities of interest are the guiding factor, and meeting the legal requirements of the contiguous and the population balance.
I can just follow up. Then why not a legend or some sort of footnote to indicate what these considerations were? Because in looking at your maps that you submitted and those submitted by the community, I really can't distinguish why I would favor one over the other than one's horizontal and the other's vertical. I mean, I've heard reasons given as to why one format may be better than the other, but there is nothing on the actual map that will show me the advantage from one to the other.
And to repeat for, I also view the form, it is difficult to hear the audience. So I'm going to repeat what you said. You're asking it would be helpful if there was a legend that took in some of the considerations that were factored into drawing the particular maps. And I'll take that feedback back to NBC, definitely. I know that you do have all of your comments compiled in one spot on the website, and that's also a good spot if you were one who drew a map to include factors. This is what we took into consideration. Sometimes there are, 24 different factors that NBC has taken into consideration in drawing a map, and a little bit of each, and a little bit of each, and a little bit of each. But certainly these have no priority over any of the other maps.
Did your corporation have a set of priorities? Because I'm really interested in the priorities you use, since you are being paid for the job, right? That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, our priorities are to make sure it's legal, population balanced, and contiguous.
Okay, those are two factors you use.
But the biggest driving force in how they're drawn are communities of interest. And we get that from you. We get that from you. We get that from what we're hearing.
If I could like to add to that, it was suggested that perhaps we should try and do legends for all the maps, such as Ms. Grivich's map, which show key business areas and so on in the city. And so I've made a highlighted note, and we will endeavor to do that so that when we have these maps presented for discussion at the November 7th public hearing and future public hearings, that there will be more information on there that we can legally put on and that would be of interest to the community in providing their feedback to the council.
All right, yes, go ahead.
I'd like to talk a little bit about this process. This process is kind of a collaboration. Jerry already mentioned that John Shoemaker came up with the idea of vertical, and that was early on, so other people saw it, and they said, yeah, that's a good idea. That way you have at least 2 councilmen representing every part of the city, which is important. We don't want one councilman isolated by themselves. That was a good idea. But then Mr. Kaufman came up with the idea, well, we really should have an element in there that has to do with commercialization. And he had his illustration. He was focusing in that discussion on basically the mall area and the plaza. And in seeing that, well, maybe there's another step, and that's where my wife came in and said, well, the Interstate 10 is the primary economic corridor, building on what had already been said. So each councilman should represent one of the 5 different, each of the 5 major economic areas of the city. So each one has their own. And so that was the idea behind hers. And the legend that you were talking about, this puts the mark of each of the 5 economic areas. Except there's actually 6, because District 5 has the Heights down south, and it also has the Restaurant Row up north. It actually is bimodal. But the other 4 each have a major area, Plaza, the Auto Mall, the Lakes, and Eastland along the freeway. So, and the problem with this going, you're focused on maps and having to have 2 hearings on every map. When people add more ideas to the equation, the process isn't really a collaboration. The legalism gets in the way, is the point I'm trying to make. Because I don't think we're really done. We're close. I think we're moving there to where we have a solution that's close, because the councilmen themselves haven't stepped in yet. And that's what I would refer to as the last iteration that hasn't happened yet. I don't know what they think. I notice they're fairly quiet about what they think. but they're going to have to speak sooner or later, and to me, that's the last iteration. That and what the process is cumbersome for that purpose.
Mr. Burbidge, I can't disagree with you on that at all. The legislation did not previously require as many public hearings for the final map. There was, in its last modification, there was concern that a map would come forward and at the last meeting it would get doctored in such a way that people couldn't really understand what was happening and then get adopted. And that was part of the reason for the change. I agree with you, it is very much a collaborative and iterative process that requires a lot of sort of give and take and maybe some changes. It sounds very much like a lot of you would very much like us to have more than just one more public hearing, and that may very well happen. I think the council will hear that, is hearing that now, and we'll hear that at the public hearing on November 7th, and we'll go from there.
And just a reminder, even if they were to select on November 7th one of those maps that was previously heard, that doesn't preclude them from requesting that we have another public hearing. So as I had stated before, your city council is fully committed to having as many public hearings as are necessary in order to select a single map that divides our community into 5 city council districts as per our settlement agreement with regard to the California Voting Rights Act lawsuit. I want to continue getting feedback from some of our first-time speakers, so go ahead.
My map is 115. Since doing that map, and listening to all the comments at all the meetings we've had since then, I've learned a tremendous amount. And
hang on, they want the mic. They can't hear you.
$20 a minute.
of course. What I was saying was how much I've learned in listening to all the comments and the different ways people have approached various parts of the city in preparing their maps, and the different concepts that they've used. Mine is 115. As I've discussed at a couple of prior hearings, my thrust was dividing what I saw as the main most important commercial areas of the city into different districts, so different council members would have vested interests in more than one council member would have a vested interest in those important areas. I did that primarily with the plaza, but had I to do it over again, I would have done the same thing with Eastland. I would have divided Eastland, certainly could be divided at least into 2 and possibly into 3 areas the way I did the plaza. I'm really sorry that the old BKK area, particularly Greens area, that giant plot could not be divided up, because I think that with the things that are going to be happening in the future there, that's an important area where more than one council member should also have a direct interest. And I'm really sorry that there was no way that that plot could not be divided into more than one district. But I think, as we talked today about some of the commercial areas, that had I to do it over again or to do another map, I would also divide Eastland the way I did the plaza. I would also try and get not so much using the vertical approach, because I think it's really contrived to get that last Area 5 to bring part of that district as far north as the freeway. But at least for the other 4 to have at least 4 of the 5 districts extending both north and south of the freeway corridor, so that at least that 80% of the council would have interests in what goes on along the corridor and on each side of the corridor. But like I said, I think I've really been impressed by the amount of information that people have gathered and the thought process that so many people have used in preparing these maps. And I think we're giving the council a volume of information and some very difficult decisions. But like I said at the last meeting, I think what they need to do, and I hope it's something that can be done, is not to pick 1 of 19 or 20 or maybe by next week 25 maps, but to take the best from various maps and create their own that takes the input of the population, the citizens, and create the best map possible, not just picking one that's been submitted.
If I could quickly respond to that, Ms. Minnick. not all of it, but the part about wish you could divide BKK, I think a lot of people feel that way, and I think there's a sense that at some time in the future there will be more development there. This is not the only time this is ever going to happen. This is just the first time that you'll draw maps. After every census, there will be another opportunity to draw maps. And in fact, the law allows the council to do not census-based, but another change when there's some significant change that would justify that. So if you had a development happen there that would really suggest the need for a revision to those district lines before the census is taken, that could be done. Typically, you're going to see it happen after the census. So as the city changes and grows, the district lines will be able to be changed to take those changes into account.
Thank you. Any other first-time speakers before we go to repeat speakers? Yes, I'm going to go ahead and bring you the mic. One moment.
Thank you.
Okay, you can sit.
Good evening. I'm Sandra Delahousse. I'm, I guess, in the minority. These maps are pretty much Greek to me, with no legend to tell me what's where. To me, it's a lot of lines, and just getting it in hand. I'm hoping, going on the web page, there will be something specific to help me and others like me, and I'm not alone, I'm sure, to get a real idea of where things are located, to be able to make an intelligent decision as to which one of these maps could really be good for West Covina. I'm concerned about the commercial aspects too, that one or two districts would not be containing all of our commercial entities. I think there should be some way of looping some part in each one, and not saying that in time we won't evolve and have different things develop, but in some of the areas they're locked in, they're landlocked, so there's going to be almost no development. And also knowing where the schools are. The vet grandkids here, I want to know where they're going to be going, how it's going to work out for them, just for the convenience. The community isn't aware that we're sitting in this building here. I'm a volunteer at Queen of the Valley, and each week I'm there. I talk to people about, make sure you get to the meeting. What meeting? Districting. It's here. It's alive. It's coming. What district? We just, as a city, aren't doing a good job in getting the word out. There was a wonderful blurb in our new Discovery magazine. City manager talked about it. Unfortunately, I have not run across one person who has read it. We have the wonderful signs over our streets to advertise our summer concerts, and that's lovely, our Halloween programs and all. To me, this is far more important and crucial to our community. I'd like to see something across a major street. This place, I think, should be filled with people who know maybe far more than me and have more questions to ask, give more input. Right now, we have folks who got their own vested interests, and that's all wonderful. But the average person who lives up and down the street, they need to be part of this as well.
Thank you. Any other first-time speakers, questions? I do want to take a moment, though, before we move on, to let Shalise kind of demonstrate a little bit on the interactive map, some of those things that was brought up. Shalise, if you want to go and demonstrate those.
So some find that it's helpful to look at the satellite view. So you can actually see what areas are populated and what areas are not. You can overlay that with a map. So,
There was a lot of interest in
Let's see that.
that's one view. We also have, and this was requested by a council member at the September 19th meeting, I believe it was, September 29th? 19th. The school district boundaries. This one may be easier to view with the streets. You can also change the background to be the topography. I think that's what we have been using earlier tonight. So there is some ability to use whatever imagery is better for you. And again, you can put your specific home address in right up at the top of the search bar, and then that's where you would enter your home address, and then you can click on the different layers. And layers is indicative of the different map options that are available, so you can see where your particular home would be in any of those districts. Any other first-time speakers before we rotate back to some second-round speakers? Yes, in the back. I'll give you a mic. 1 moment, please.
You think I need it? Pretty loud. Steve Bennett, 45-year resident. It's pretty well known that I'm opposed to districts in general, so I'll kind of skip that part for a second. First thing I want to kind of say a couple things. I'm in favor of the north-south. I agree with the economic interest. I agree with the fact that every councilman gets a piece of the city, a piece of the economic corridor on the 10. So I think that's a very vital aspect of our city. I think we have way too much division right now. You have people calling areas of the city underrepresented and this represented and that represented, and in all reality it's the person calling it underrepresented is the only person who knows it's underrepresented, and people there have no idea. So I don't quite understand that, but I guess he can decide himself. Person spoke earlier and said that they want to have sub-police stations. This is not the LA County Sheriff's. West Covina is just fine with one police station. We don't need substations. I'm trying to figure out how Las Vegas at the last meeting and at this meeting is now part of our district meetings. We had a guy last week attribute the people opposed to districts as the Las Vegas shooter. You have it come up again. I'm blown away that that's even tied together. Talk about fire districts. Are any of the maps currently, and you can answer this when I'm done, are any of the maps currently drawn by fire district? I believe the answer is no, but I'll let the demographer say that. Someone mentioned contact with council members. I heard someone say earlier they speak to them on the phone and they email them. And I've been in the city 4 to 5 years. I don't have any issue speaking to a council member. They've lived all over the city. I've talked to everyone. Sykes was a council member. He lived in the South Side. I spoke to him. People in the South Hills, the proclaimed South Hills area, I speak to them. Lloyd lives in the North Side. I'm sorry, they get around. I don't have an issue with speaking to a council member. Anyone that I know that wants to speak to a council member can speak to a council member, regardless of where they are. So, to me, the argument is moot that if they live on the north side or the south side, and if the district runs long, that it's going to cause disconnect. I just don't believe that. Forgive me. It is a notice in point number 105. Sorry, I use a 3-digit code. Looks eerily familiar to the 2009 campaign that lost 2-1 in our city by a vote. So it's kind of funny that 105 is back in the mix, because 2009 we voted 2-1 to not do districts in general, and this was the map they wanted to use. So to see people kind of going, hey, you know what? That doesn't look so bad. Well, it didn't look so bad to a third of the city too, but the other 2/3 didn't like it. So I'm going to have to go with the 2009 vote and say that that map automatically should not be used, because we as a city 8 years ago, voted it down to begin with. So to me, that one should be eliminated right off the bat. As for the north-south ones, probably Shoemaker's map is probably the closest that I like so far. It has issues too in my mind. Sorry, John. There's none of them that are perfect. I don't even want a district map. I think we should just have one district, and it's called West Covina. But anyways, I think that's probably the most likely. I'd make a few changes to it. I'll probably end up working with John to have him submit a new one and give him my ideas. I'm sure he's open to that. But that's probably the approach. I don't understand how the argument from the plaintiffs in this scenario was that the people in the South Hills underrepresent the area. So now we're breaking the people up, and now they're arguing that if they break them up in this way, they're still underrepresenting. Forgive me, but it's hypocrisy at its best. So again, I don't think this is good any way you look at it. I think it's going to continue to divide our city from someone who keeps claiming we're already divided. So that's my comments.
I'm on first time. Can I get a phone mic here?
Another first time speaker over here.
Thank you very much. My name is Cesar Cervantes, and I want to make it clear that I supported districts from day one. I think it's necessary, and that's why I support 105. And out of all the speakers that I heard tonight, the only person that made a lot of sense, Mr. Sykes. If it is about the money, I don't think if one council member represents all the locations where big business are, all the money is going to one account. So I don't see the need for, to me that's not important. What's important to me is having, again, the unity, number one. Number two, make sure that this district has a fire department. And I do agree with the opinion that we need to have substations to be closer to the people that we represent. North-South, that defeat the purpose. And going back to how the people defeated districts 2009 is irrelevant. It's 2019, and we gotta move forward. And I support anything that looks like 105. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to clarify, for those of you, when we move to 5 city council districts, this does not mean that we are changing our 5 fire districts. So that is always a recommendation that can be made by the fire department as to where those fire districts should be located. But I don't want there to be any misinformation out there alluding to the fact that when we have 5 city council districts that are drawn in such a way that that will be the new fire districts. That's not how our fire districts are drawn. Again, that will not necessarily impact also where our police service areas are. It may or may not, but I don't want to make any assumptions out there at this point in time that these 5 city council districts will be exactly the same as any of those areas. This is a specific process related to our 5 city council districts, and it's related to the California Voting Rights Act, and we're looking at things that are population balanced and that are contiguous, okay? So let's see, we got another first-time speaker over here, and then we're going to go back to some repeat speakers, and we do have about 10 more minutes left of tonight's meeting, so go right ahead.
No, I just want to ask a question.
Yes.
So it doesn't have anything to do with school districts? So
correct.
whatever city council, you're not going to make your child's school?
It does not have to do with school districts either. You are correct. Okay? So we're going to go with some repeat speakers unless we have any more first-time speakers. No? Okay, we had a repeat speaker over here. Who wants to go first?
Oh, get the mic again.
Okay.
Actually, I was going to ask, I don't know if the answer to it was, did any of the maps drawn on fire districts that are current? I understand the change. And the second thing is my concern with what this gentleman over here says about having substations is then you're going to get the situation where a council member thinks that's his police station or that's his fire station. They're all part of the city. And you're going to get that where they're going to assume that they have control over a specific station or a specific district. I don't want that. I want those to intermingle in the city. So my argument back to that argument, and I understand you may support 105, and I'm sorry, but I do believe in the vote, and I do believe that a 2-to-1 margin is 9 years ago something, or 8 years ago, that is something we should definitely consider. So I don't understand that. But like I said, I don't want to see a council member have a belief that they are in control of a police station, a substation, a fire district, or a police district. None of that should be even entering into the politics of it, much less not even getting into the cost of it. We can barely afford a police and fire with 1 station right now, and we're underrepresented, and we already have a guy who thinks that we can put substations in. It's just, I'm sorry, it's the wackiness that we see in people thinking, sorry.
Okay, so just to respond to the question that came up, Shalice, fire districts, the boundaries of the fire districts were provided to national demographics, but that not necessarily was a requirement that was provided or utilized to be able to just draw the districts. Is that correct?
That's correct. It gets very complicated because fire districts are not necessarily population-based.
Thank you. Thank you. That answers that question. Okay, and then with regard to having a single fire district and a single fire station or a single substation in a single council district, one of the examples that Doug Johnson from NBC had brought up at our last meeting last Saturday, and I want to reiterate for those that were not here for that, is to think of it like school districts and school district board of trustees, and he had talked about the importance of not having a single school be identified with a single board member because we didn't want them to be thinking that was their population zone, that was their school, that was their attendance zone, and that was their particular school. And so they do that in school districts. They do make sure there's some crossover there, and so that is just an example that Doug had brought up at the last meeting regarding districting. I want to go back to, we had some questions on the other side of the room. Yes, in the back, and I'm going to go ahead and bring you the microphone if you can hold one moment.
I want to confess a bit of ignorance in the area of the California Voting Rights Act. I have a legal question. Would it be unwise or wise legally to ignore the California Voting Rights Act in this situation and abide by the Federal Voting Rights Act? Could the council do that, and would the result be bulletproof legally? Because the plan I supported would be the plan that would be bulletproof, and it wouldn't be open to further litigation, further challenges. So my question is, in view of my ignorance of the California Voting Rights Act, would it be unwise to ignore the California Voting Rights Act and just abide by the federal law?
I think it's a great idea.
Both the Federal Voting Rights Act and the California Voting Rights Act apply, and we are required to comply with both of them.
They apply
So,
differently.
I'm sorry?
They apply differently. There's less scrutiny in California.
But they both apply to this process.
But there's less scrutiny.
And so we do need to follow both of them. We cannot ignore the California Voting Rights Act.
We had a second-time speaker over here. Yes?
Mr. Johnson, is the map you submitted one of these maps that were handed out tonight?
No, it's 118.
118, thank you, sir.
We had some additional second-time speakers up in the front. Yeah. Getting my 10,000 steps in tonight. This is happening.
I understand why you include administrative districts like and utilities and schools. I really wish it wasn't included because the city does not run the school districts. The city does not run the utilities. The city does not run certain things. They're just the way they are. The administrative districts, such as maintenance of the streets and things, I'd like to see as complete and united as possible. I don't really want to see my council person making sure my street gets paved before your street gets paved. I want to see the city as united as possible. So these administrative districts, operational districts, whatever you want to call them, fire, police, public safety, and stuff, that's really not for the council person in my view, but they're part of this process for the maps, but I'm not happy about that.
If I could just comment on that very quickly, Ms. Butters. The reason that we include all that information is because too many people those are relevant to the community's of interest analysis. And this community is different than a lot of other communities. Some communities, the school district boundaries are contiguous with the city boundaries, and so it is a relevant criteria.
I understand. I just had to throw my 2 cents on my own view on that. It keeps coming up, and it really does concern me, this concept of gerrymandering. Our council got this in their lap. They didn't ask for this. We have 5 council members that I honestly, truthfully think are wrestling with a very difficult issue, and I personally do not want to consider where they live on what type of map should be considered.
we need to look at what's in the best interest of the city. We don't know, and what concerns me just as much, or more so, I mean, is who will run? Are we risking creating districts for people that might want to run? That's just as concerning as maybe where a council member sits. Let's just trust the council has a hard task, and let's just consider the districts in the best interest of the city. As far as communications, I'd like to just share what I have learned from neighbors throughout the city. Not in my own neighborhood, but we've been adopting this in my neighborhood, the few blocks where I can walk because I'm old and have bad feet. We communicate with each other through email, through printing out newsletters, and we make sure that people know of these meetings. We use Facebook. I've created a Facebook page. And I learned this from people that were living in Shadow Oaks. They have an email system, just neighbors keeping neighbors informed. I would encourage all of us to kind of consider doing that. Not everybody's online. That's why I print out and I go down and walk to the people that aren't online. It's important, I agree with you. It is important to get the word out. The city can only do so much. A certain amount we need to do ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, we do share this information on the city's social media sites. So we are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at West Covina City. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at West Covina PD. I encourage you, if you are already following us, when we share the information about districting, to go ahead and share that with your followers, with your friends, with your fans that are following you, and that will help get the word out. Only so many people are following those accounts for at West Covina City and at West Covina PD, and you can reach a much larger audience by talking to your neighbors and your friends that live in your community. Any other speakers, questions? Yes, go ahead. Anybody need a mic?
I just have a couple questions, I'll be real quick. Hello, I'm Glenn Kennedy, 55-year resident, West Covina. Are you going to take any more maps, Ms. Barlow?
Anybody can submit maps.
Till
and
when?
And continue to submit maps, but...
Till what date?
Well, we can't get it into the agenda packet if we don't have it by, what's the date?
We need to have...
Sorry.
Musical microphones.
Yes. Thank you. So we're asking for if you have any additional map submissions, if you would like them to be viewed at the November 7th meeting, we are asking for them to come to us by October 17th. That's next Tuesday. It gives us 2 weeks for the demographer to analyze them, to make sure that they are either population balanced, contiguous, and then also to figure out which category they are grouped into, and then provide that feedback so that we can have the recommendations that go to council. Now, if after that date you still have maps to submit, you can submit them on November 7th. And the council could consider them, they could hear your feedback, but remember, these maps have to be presented at 2 public hearings. So they wouldn't be able to take action on your map at the November 7th meeting. But they could receive it, they could hear your feedback, and they could utilize that to create new maps, suggest modifications to the demographers and to staff, to be able to come back to them and hold those 2 public hearings. So yes, you can continue to submit maps.
One more question.
The other thing that I would add is that we are required to post the maps online or make them available publicly at least 7 days prior to the public hearing. So if we got it after that, we would not be able to even talk about it at the public hearing.
Okay, one more question. So, if you look at all these maps and the council's going to have at the end is going to decide one way or another, do they have to take one of these maps, or can they go in the back room and say, screw it, we're going to draw our own map?
Well,
no, really, because...
they can't go into the back room because this is a public
so
process.
it has to be public.
It has to be done publicly. This is not an issue that could be discussed in closed session or where the map is drawn in closed session. They can make their comments publicly and they can ask for changes to the map that they believe are appropriate. And we'll, as Ms. Minnick has said repeatedly, we'll make changes and bring them back for as many public hearings as are necessary to get it done.
Thank you.
All right, any other speakers? Okay. So this is, we're going to do like maybe one or two more speakers, and then we're going to go ahead and conclude the meeting.
I just wanted to follow up on what was just brought up. So, am I understanding correctly that the map that is chosen will be one of the maps that has been in public hearing? Right, okay.
Yes, the map that is ultimately selected by law must be considered at least 2 public hearings.
There we go.
So no map will be adopted on any date that hasn't been publicly viewed and discussed at 2 public hearings.
But you added that if the councilmen feel that it needs some adjustments, so that required 2 more hearings after those adjustments?
Yes.
Well, okay, then I understand it. Thank you.
Okay, and any final questions, comments, feedback? Okay. So I will go ahead and summarize just for everyone and those viewing at home or on YouTube on their phones. Thank you all for coming this evening. Our next step in the process after this is going to be to go to those public hearings that we discussed today. The first one that we are anticipating happening will be on Tuesday, November 7th at 7 p.m. and that is part of our regularly scheduled City Council meeting. Remember and keep in mind that the map that is selected by the City Council must appear in 2 public hearings, and your City Council has committed to having as many public hearings as necessary. I encourage you to sign up at westcovina.org/districts for our e-notifications so that you can get notified about those upcoming public hearings directly in your email, as well as any updates that we make to the website. We also encourage you to share this information with your neighbors and friends that are following along on social media. If you have any questions after today's meeting or any additional feedback, I encourage you to go to westcovina.org/districts. You can fill out our online form to submit your comments anonymously. You can also email us at districts@westcovina.org. Thank you all for coming this evening. If you'd like to see a recording of tonight's meeting, it will be available at westcovina.org/live. Thank you so much and have a good evening.